This is Chicken Philosophy, Carl Jung's Black Books, part 64. And as you can see, everything is perfectly normal. Yeah, nothing unusual about the location. 64 is 8 times 8, which rather reminds me of the Camia of Mercury. I'll put that right here. Which, does bear a passing resemblance to a chessboard or a checkers board. That's enough said about that. Okay. I forgot my magnifying glass. I'm gonna go get it. There it is. I manifested it. How's the sound today? Is it all right? It's a little different. We'll see how things go over these next, you know how when you're in the middle of something, manifesting something. By the way, cheers. Today we have a beverage, but no incense. I forgot to bring incense. But we've got like twice the beverage, Anyway, all right. I'll just get to the reading, I think, right? That's what we do now. So this is a new book. Oh, if you you stumbled upon this and you're still here, if you're interested, the Carl Jung Black Books playlist, you can start with episode 1 if you want to, or there's 64 episodes, you can pick one. If you're in the future, there's more than 64. Here's the link. Okay. And, okay, cheers. Nice. That is the end of this paper lid. I don't know. Maybe people growing up today are just used to the feeling of like wood on their face, paper straws and paper lids. I'm all for saving the environment and all, but I just can't get used to it. So we're going lidless. Book 5. Oh, there's like a little thing in the front. It's a Roman numeral 5. It's kind of neat the way they. Can you see that? The way they, duplicate the notes that he had in the front of his notebook and put it in the front of these notebooks. It makes it feel more like you're right there with Carl Jung with his diary. Book 5, March 13th, 1914 through January 30th, 1916. Yeah, I think he's writing in his notebooks less and less, but we'll see how it goes. All right. There's a quote. It says, "Do you sense it? The duty of the world." That's D-U-T-Y, not D-O-O-D-I-E, if you were wondering. "Yes, from spheres to spheres, it needs to bear seed from seed. It brings us the light of the world, sprinkling as if from a dark sieve. It sows love, 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 from night to night, from pole to pole." And then it says Dehmel, which I'm sure is not how you pronounce that. So I guess it's a quote, right? Yeah, these lines were copied here by Tony Wolff. I say f because there's 2 F's at the end of Wolff. They are from an epic poem by Richard Dehmel, 1863 through 1920. Zwei Menschen, 2 people. In 1905, this work inspired... I'm not going to read all the footnotes, so why start now? All right. March 18th, 1914. This is Carl Jung writing. You ready? "A number of times I read in Nietzsche. The expression, quote, ultimate solitude, end quote. This is the phrase that stands before me. My soul, do you hear this expression? Quote, I listen and thank you. I listen and I think. End quote. What are you thinking about? Quote, the causes of solitude. End quote. What do you think about these causes? Bracket parentheses, question mark, end bracket parentheses. Quote, there are many, some in you, some in other people. End quote. So let me know. Quote, all you must give is love. End quote. Love is quite weak in my case. There is not a lot left. I'm drained. Everything turns against me. Quote, why don't you give? End quote. It seems to me that I give enough. Quote, to me as well. End quote. You can see that I'm trying. I try to give as much as possible to you. I know that it's not much. I don't know where the rest is. Is this present ebb and darkness actually intentional? Must I feel solitary? Quote, silly questions. Try again, if you can. End quote. At times I completely lose my nerve. What will happen? Quote, how do I know? End quote. Have a try. Perhaps you can achieve something. Quote, you are formulaic, but I will just reach out and grab. Here it is. Look at it. End quote. A stinking ram. That was grabbed. What? That was a grab into hell. All right. Quote, well, what do you think about it? End quote. What can I think? You know, your gifts are pretty obscure. There's the line break, little line, horizontal line across the screen. So, we'll see what happens next. Quote, a ram with cooked horns and a bit of a tail, a harmless image of Satan. Can you use it? End quote. I am astonished, not to say disappointed. What is the use of your stinking present? Quote, he reeks afar, his glory scatters all around him. End quote. I can see why fundies are freaked out by these books. A disgusting glory, it seems to me. Quote, your heraldic animal, my dear. End quote. Your mockery is inappropriate. Quote, not so much. It comes from solitude. One starts to smell in solitude, and the smell reaches far. End quote. Stop joking. You are worse than men. You are a true devil. Quote, why wouldn't you like to be bothered by men? End quote. Now, it's not clear, there's no punctuation indicating, but this could either be read, there's no comma, but, quote, why wouldn't you like to be bothered by men? End quote. Or, but since there's no comma, then it seems to read, quote, why wouldn't you like to be bothered by men? Oh well, we'll just keep reading. End quote. I thought one could perhaps do without this torment, or one could bother others the same way they do it to me. Since I didn't want that bother, I crawled back into myself. Quote, that's no good. You are both the sacrificer and the victim. And then there's no end quote, but I think there should be. This is almost unbearable. I can hardly do it. Quote, almost and hardly, hence not entirely. End quote. Must it be? Quote, what shall become of life if you don't take part? Slaughter and being slaughtered. End quote. This truth smells like human blood. Does it really have to be that way? Quote, why do you doubt? Do you still have childish illusions about life? Sharpen your knife. End quote. You are incredibly cruel. Quote, day won't break without your slaughtering and sacrificing. End quote. Myself? Or who? Or what? Quote, reach out and slaughter whatever you can grab. End quote. This is unheard of and impossible. How can I do that? Quote, with a knife. Pay no mind to the screams. There have to be sacrifices. Otherwise you will do yourself in. End quote. But humaneness, what does it say about this? Quote, it's eminently humane that you kill your brother so that you might live. End quote. My brother's life is dear to me. Quote, whoever does not value his own life will lose it. Now you must live. Is this still his soul talking, or is he talking to the ram's head? I'm assuming it's his soul, hence the voice. Whoever does not value his own life will lose it. Now you must live. Others ought to look after themselves and not stand where your knife stabs. You shouldn't become a monkey and fool to others for the sake of tomfoolery. Everything has a limit. They will be insolent to you because you have laid down your weapons. End quote. Wouldn't I commit a terrible injustice if I followed you? Quote, do you call it just when you do not live? Who shall live at all if you don't? Everyone should live. You act in self-defense. Your kindness borders almost on the absurd. End quote. My, your language sounds violent. This is new to me. Yeah, it's his soul. If he was talking to the devil or something, he'd be like, oh, well, that's typical because you're the devil, but he's talking in a familiar way to whoever's talking. So, anyway. Bracket parentheses, quote, and bracket parentheses. No wonder you are insanely patient. I want to live too, but you suffocate me. I will shove you against the wall if you do not obey. You have already had a taste of me today. Stand with yourself and live. You are entirely sucked dry. Bracket parentheses, end quote, end bracket parentheses. Might you finally be telling the truth? Food for thought. All right, that's the end of that passage, and obviously that's a bit too short to constitute one whole episode of Chicken Philosophy, so we're going to read one more. March 19th, 1914. My God, what inner solitude! Is this the way? What do you say? Quote, I tell you, this is your way. It is not easy, and there is no other. There is no something crossed out, and then other, end quote. Where does it lead? Quote, if you knew that, you would know everything. If it is evidently impossible to know it. End quote. The chaos inside me is horrible. Quote, he who is pregnant with chaos is fortunate. End quote. Maybe I'll die giving birth. Quote, sometimes that happens to women in labor. End quote. I'm horrified. Quote, why should you not be horrified? Not is underlined. Horror belongs to loneliness, and and loneliness is your way. You have enough people in your outer life. End quote. What should become of my chaos? Quote, what becomes of chaos? Orderly world. End quote. If I knew how to take hold of it, quote, be patient, it will take hold. Bracket parentheses, full stop, end bracket parentheses, end quote. I think I can feel the grip of chaos. I'm powerless. Quote, how should you be powerful? We are children of chaos, inextricably intertwined with it. Our deepest nature is disorder. That is the beginning of all things. End quote. The fathomlessness is terrible. Are there no straight lines or solid points? Quote, first they had to be created. End quote. But how? Shall I begin with the nearest? Quote, or maybe with the furthest. To do the nearest is good for beginners. End quote. What is the furthest? Quote, love inside out. End quote. What are you saying? Love inside out? You are terribly crazy. How shall I take this? Quote, there is straightforward love and love inside out. End quote. I don't get it. What is straightforward love? Quote, straightforward love, straightforward direct love. End quote. Yeah, that end quote shouldn't be there, guys. Unless it's crossed out. What are you doing? Straightforward direct love. Love inside out is better described as indirect love. To my way of thinking, loving someone indirectly is to love their obverse. Love the generosity of the miser, the ugly of the beautiful, the rationality of the crazy, and the badness of good. End quote. That's asking a lot. I doubt that I can do it. Might I do it with myself? Quote, as always, you need to begin with yourself. End quote. How? Shall I love my badness or my goodness? Am I good or bad? Rational or crazy? Generous or miserly? You see, I don't know anything about myself. Quote, look at yourself in the mirrors of others. End quote. For those close, something crossed out, I seem, something crossed out, to be good. For those distant, bad. With increasing distance, my virtues turn into their opposites. Thus I believe in the inner identity of the opposites. What is it that I should love about myself? Quote, what you regard as bad. End quote. That end quote doesn't need to be there, guys. You're doing it again and again and again, and it's tiresome. What you regard as bad, you can see that you are good. Because, by the way, if you're wondering who I'm talking to the translators and the editors. What happens is Carl Jung will be writing, quoting his soul, and he'll get to a point where he'll draw an end quote, but then he'll realize that his soul is still talking, so he'll cross out the end quote and keep talking, and then do another end quote. And so when they're putting it in text, when they're transliterating it into legible text, they just put an end quote. And then there's more stuff, and then there's another end quote. So every time it's like putting a stumbling block in the way, so you have to stop and go, wait, who's talking what? Anyway, alright. Yes. What you regard as bad, you can see that you are good, because any judgment is blurred by distance. The further, the more subjective. End quote. What do I find bad in myself? Quote, your emotions. End quote. It's like, what is that? I think Rick Sanchez came to mind. Anyway, the toxicity thing, where he went to the spa and had what you consider toxic about yourself removed, and so it's different for each person depending on their values. Should I lose my temper? Quote, don't go too far, but value your emotions. They are instructive and a vital principle to others. I am afraid that I am hurtful. Quote, just as the others. Do you want to be better than others? That would be a Christian ideal that leads to self-righteousness and desolation. What I want to say is, humbly be as bad as others. It will do both you and others good. End quote. Your truth is dangerous and subjective. Quote, ultimately, truth is always subjective and noxious to others. Only, cross out only, you are immune only to your own poison. End quotes. Should one refrain from teaching truth to others? Quote, yes, one should. Restrict yourself to teaching the way to subjective truth. Objective truth in these matters comes down to a delusional system. Ultimate things ought to be subjective truths. End quote. It seems hardly worth the effort to continue the search for truth if we finally end up only at the subjective. Quote, you don't know the significance of the subjective. It is of cosmic significance. It reaches to the kernel of things. End quote. That's obscure. Quote, it's part of the essence of the subjective, and it, cross out it, cannot be formulated in another way. The subjective is finally illogical through and through. Not understandable, but acceptable. End quote. How accept something not understandable? Can one even do it? What? How accept something not understandable? Did he make a typo, or am I not? Okay, that's what it says. How accept, A-C-C-E-P-T, something not understandable. All right. Anyway, quote, but peoples at all times and of all places have done that. Don't you trust yourself to have that quality? End quote. I have unlearnt it in fear and trembling, and only you know with what agony. Are you telling me to start all over again and undo everything I've won through suffering and pain? Quote, I sympathize, but it belongs to your completion as a man. End quote. I think this work will sour me. I almost despair of this task. Quote, patience. Even that will be completed. End quote. It's easy for you to talk. The subjective seems to me like an undefinable primordial soup. Hopeless and arbitrary. Quote, it is related to the chaos, the deep essence of the world. The law is surface. Order is the outer side. Chaos is your mother. You rest in uncertainty as in the mother's womb, eternally becoming and in a seminal state. End quote. Uncertainty is disgusting and abhorrent to me. Quote, so you care a lot for it. Accept it, and you will love it. End quote. What's the use? No one will understand it. Quote, but many will accept it. This burden is way too excessive. By all the gods, I cannot cope with it. Quote, not today and not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow. End quote. Who will believe in your optimism? You make me laugh. Quote, jesters were influential personalities. End quote. That doesn't make it easier. You're breaking me. Quote, "Blessed are those who are broken for the sake of their soul. The kingdom of the heavens will be theirs." End quote. Cheap sayings, but I am bleeding from many wounds. Quote, "It happens for my sake. Don't be challenged by it. Here is torment. There is fulfillment." End quote. "Where there? Shall I believe in a beyond?" Quote, "In a beyond of yours." End quote. Do you want to say Happy New Year?
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! Woo! All right. That was today's Carl Jung reading. Food for thought. Hope you enjoyed the music. And, all right, this is official. I know this is the third episode in a row where I've wished you a Happy New Year. But as I'm recording this right now, it is January 31st. I will surely not see you again until 2025. But again, you might be seeing me in 2025. Either way, Happy New Year, and until next time.